Thank you for joining us today for our webinar, Languages are Fundamental, How to Make Learning Feel Fun and Meaningful. My name is Sabrina Feliz, and I'm part of the World Languages team. We're so glad to have you with us this evening. On behalf of World Languages, we're thrilled to continue this partnership with Central States. And this year's webinar series is inspired by their 2026 conference theme, Languages are Fundamental. Each session is designed to give you practical strategies and inspiration that you can take straight into the classroom. To kick things off, I'd like to introduce Josh Legrave, Coordinator of Digital Media and Marketing for Central States, who will share a few words. Josh, the floor is yours.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for this first in a series of 4 webinars with CLET World Languages this year around our conference theme of Languages are Fundamental. We hope you'll also be able to join us in December, February, and April for our other webinars co-sponsored with CLET World Languages, and also we hope you're able to join us this March in Chicago, March 12th through the 14th, for our Central States Conference with the theme of Languages are Fundamental. The program is amazingly full with a ton of sessions, workshops, cultural workshops, and a language immersion workshops available to help you continue learning and also have some fun in our teaching, because that's the part of it all. The joy and fun of teaching is what keeps us invigorated and motivated. So once again, thank you all for being here and enjoy the presentation from Diego.
Thank you, Josh.
Thank you, Josh. It's now my pleasure to introduce our presenter, Diego Ojeda. He's an experienced world language educator, speaker, and consultant known for his creative and engaging approach to teaching. He's passionate about helping teachers design classrooms where students don't just learn languages, but enjoy the process and find personal meaning in it. Diego, we're so excited to hear from you. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Sabrina. Thank you so much, Josh. And thank you to CLED World Languages for sponsoring this webinar for world language teachers this afternoon. So yeah, here we are. We're here to talk about that main idea that our friends at Central States came up with. Languages are fundamental, which is a great title because it's not just inspiring, but it's also the kind of title that gives you a lead, that shows you the way, because we're not focusing just on the fun, but we're focusing on the importance as well. Why languages or teaching languages should be at the same time fun and at the same time a way in which we help our students understand many things that are behind learning new languages. So this evening, we're going to talk about how to make learning feel fun and meaningful. And for that, we have some examples, and we're going to be reflecting on some important things. The agenda of the webinar is this one. First, we're going to have a short opening. Then we're going to talk about why should teaching language be fun, and how motivation plays an important role when we talk about teaching languages. Then we move to practical strategies and how to make learning fun and meaningful. So we talk about activities, we talk about different things that are going to help us in the class motivating our students. Then we move to high impact mini projects. We'll talk about the importance of mini projects versus the big projects. And then we have a closing, a reflection about our main topic. So this is the agenda for this evening, and we're going to start. So why fun plus motivation matter? Okay, so before we start, once again, we talk about the goal of the webinar, which is let's understand what's fun, and let's understand how can we make it fun for students. But my question that you can answer in the chat right now is, What activity has made your students say, this is fun? Please write in the chat if you can remember. You don't have to give the details, but kind of like give me an idea. What activity has made your students say, this is fun? Okay, all right, here we go. I'm gonna start reading you. So, highlighter words. Okay, I haven't done it, but I can tell what it is. Highlighter words. We have competitive games. Yes. Kahoot. Yes. Never too old. Learning rotations. Okay, kind of like the change, let's do something different. When we do speaking, the whole block. Okay, see, students want to speak the language. So if they see that they are using the language in class, that's important for them. And they can say, yes, this is fun. More Kahoots. And then jump rope games from Latin America. Those cultural games are also engaging because they're not familiar with them. The Plato game. Okay, we're gonna have to talk about later because I have no idea what the Plato game is. A day, a day of the Dead Diorama Project, music. My students love anything that involves music, but also the game 20 questions. Okay, Quizlet Life, El Juego Yo También El Círculo, word associations, play matamoscas, games, whenever they have to compete, games, language games, unfair game, Papa Caliente. Okay, thank you so much. Sharing, competing in teams. Okay, uh, one thing that I have to say here is that we are very lucky that we can answer that question because it's not always the case, right? And it's not always or have not always been the case. I've been teaching for a very long time. And if you ask me when I was starting to teach, especially in the United States 26 years ago, how do you make your classes fun, Señor Ojeda? I will say that I will include a lot of competitive games, right? Because I understood that kids in the United States are very competitive. So this competition motivates them. And if I give the name of a football team to one group and another football team to the other group, let's say Packers versus Vikings, oh, that just makes things even more interesting to them, right? Uh, but that was 26 years ago. And I always enjoyed my time and these activities. But I always was thinking, okay, what's going to happen in 20 years when I don't have the same energy? What's going to happen? Okay, now after 26 years of teaching, 34 years total, because the other years I taught in my country, Colombia, I can still say that the kids still say, this is fun. But wait, I'm not doing those competitive games anymore. So, how can we move to an environment, a class environment where the students feel that they are having fun while learning and not necessarily always playing a game? So that was kind of like, okay, we need to move to this stage because maybe when it's not just a game, things are more meaningful and maybe we can bring more use of the language. So thank you for answering those questions. And that's what we're going to see here in this webinar. Okay. So we talk about different things. We need to talk about autonomy, relevance, and personal connection. These are three important pillars of intrinsic motivation. Let's talk a little bit about intrinsic motivation. That is the motivation that we want to inspire in our students, meaning that they want to do it. They want to participate. They want to do the projects and they want to be active in the class because they want to learn thanks to these three pillars that we allow in the class: autonomy, relevance, personal connection. versus extrinsic motivation, which is the motivation that happens when we have, for example, little gifts in the classroom. That if the student won a game or participated well, we give them Ojeda bucks. And I have bills that say Ojeda, $1 or $2, and then I give them that, and they can turn that into a little gifty in the classroom, or maybe a candy or something like that. I don't do it, but I know some of us do it. Okay, they seem to be very motivated by this, but that is a little extrinsic motivation because it's not as connected with their goals and with what they want. So there are other examples, but I'm not going to stop there. I want to talk about autonomy. So give the students choices, but real choices that matter. For example, instead of assigning one uniform project, let's give them 3 creative options. For example, a podcast or a magazine page or a video journal. Let's help them or allow them to choose how to show what they have learned. So, first pillar of what is going to take us to intrinsic motivation and therefore to fun in the class is that autonomy. Let's allow them to choose. Okay? So, why this works? Because choice communicates trust. If I allow my students to make decisions in the classroom, I'm telling them, hey, I trust that you're going to be doing a very good job with what you chose. Okay? Maybe I'm giving them 3 choices. I also tell them, or propose something. Give me another choice. If I like it, maybe. If you're organized, presenting what you want to do, maybe I'm going to say, okay, let's do it. So when we communicate trust, that fuels engagement in the class. When the students feel engaged, they think that is fun. Why? Because there are so many classes where they feel detached, where they feel disengaged from what's going on in the class because they are told what to do all the time. We cannot do that, teacher. We need to work with autonomy. Remember, let's give them choices. Okay. Next one, we talk about relevance. So relevance is like, okay, what is the purpose of doing this? How is this real? How is this connecting to my life or real life? I mean, it doesn't have to be their life, as long as they can see that it's connecting to reality. Okay? So, for example, when introducing reflexive verbs, and obviously I'm talking about the Spanish example here, students can create memes about their own morning routines or about their favorite athletes. So there's relevance here in what we are doing. For example, for the AP class, the class and the topic of beauty and aesthetics, the students can analyze how social media filters shape beauty standards among their own generation. It's very interesting to talk about this. I was a little bit hesitant to talk about filters with my AP class because I didn't want to hurt anyone's feelings, but the students reacted very well, and I was asking them questions about how using these filters affect or have an effect on the way we see beauty, on the canon of beauty, to the point that if the person one day publishes a picture without filter, the reaction is like, what? And people is like, wow, didn't use the filter this time. So it's changing their minds because It's not the person is using the filter, therefore I know that person is using the filter, but this person doesn't look like this person looks like this. No, it's like, how come you're not using the filter anymore? Is that you, Señor Ojeda? Are you that ugly? Oh my gosh. Changes the canon, the standards of beauty. It's a great conversation. So this is real. This happens every day in their lives through TikTok, through Instagram, even WhatsApp, I think, has filters. Uf, increíble, ¿verdad? Why it works? Students engage deeply when language becomes a vehicle for expressing their world. So if language is just based on artificial scenarios, okay, guys, let's have a conversation about weather. Oh, hace mucho viento hoy. Sí, hace frío. Creo que va a llover. It's a conversation about weather, the typical conversation about weather. In the meantime, I was talking about rain and cold, and in the meantime, they look outside of the window and it's bright and shiny, and it's probably 100 degrees. Okay, student is not saying anything because they're used to the game of learning in modern education. They know that we enter the classroom most of the times to the artificial, to fake situations. That is not relevant to them. Okay, they maybe can learn the vocabulary, but that's not going to connect them. So we have talked about autonomy. Now we talk about relevance. And now we talk about personal connection. And these three things, again, for those who just got here, take us to the intrinsic motivation. And the intrinsic motivation take us by the hand to fun in the class. How to not always have to rely on the games to have fun. Well, let's take a look at what we're doing here. So personal connections, meaning building activities that invite emotion and identity. For example, a project about poetry about me. They can write short, simple poems about who they are and what inspires them. I'm going to show you an example later. Okay? So, grammar then becomes a tool for self expression, not a goal. And that's another issue. When grammar is a goal, grammar has to be a tool, and we can make mistakes. I tell my students, if grammar is a tool, just think about you trying to fix something with a tool. Let's say a screwdriver. I don't even know the names of these tools in real life. But what happens with the first time you use a real tool is that you're probably not to be as skillful using that. You're probably going to nail with the hammer something, you're probably going to hurt your finger. You're going to make mistakes. So grammar should be a tool, and we should be okay with those mistakes. So the personal connection. For example, in Spanish 4, I have a project that is called Magazine of My Life, or Me, My Life Magazine. I'm going to show you that example as well. But what I like about this project is it allows students to use real pictures at the same time that they are using the past tense. But it's so different when you're using the past tense with a picture of you and things that happen to you than when you're using the past tense on a conjugation table or with some comics on a book. Okay? So this personal connection is a must. Why it works? When learning is personal, persistence and joy follow naturally. In other words, when we take into account that personal connection in whatever activities we're doing, there's less frustration. Students act up and frustrate because they don't see the connection. But when they want to express themselves, when they want to share about them, they persist. I'll share with you another example of how we do this. We have these mini projects, and sometimes the students need to present those mini projects to the audience. But we don't go to, okay, let's put together the project in class. If you have any questions, I'm here to answer questions. Make sure that you're ready to present the following class. Before the presentation, we have a session, a whole class, just dedicated to practice. And the students, when I tell them that, they're like, what? Yeah, we're going to practice. So each one of you is going to present a third of your project just to practice. And I'm going to give you verbal feedback while you do that third of your presentation. And you're going to take into account that feedback to do a better presentation next time. So they persist. And it has been a game changer in my class, because in the past, I confess, I was like, okay, let's put together the project, we're going to present next class, okay, or in two classes. They didn't have the chance to practice. So it is very important to help them understand that if they um, make an effort based on the feedback that I gave them, then they'll be more connected to what they're doing in the class. Okay, my friends. So when we talk about personal connections, here is a sample of a page. This is in the program Reporteros 3 by Clet World Languages. And here the students have the opportunity to talk about themselves. Obviously, these are examples, but these characters are talking about what they like, what they don't like. They are also talking about what they think about the other person. So I know that le gustan las palomitas, lee novelas policíacas. It's very simple language. That means she likes popcorn, she likes mystery novels, but when they think about the other, Luisa es una intelectual que cree saberlo todo. Oh, she's an intellectual. She thinks she knows everything. I like this because it's a very real, honest way to show what goes through our students' minds. I believe that sometimes publishers are too focused on how this looks, but this is okay because the reaction of the students, it's very positive. They also want to express what they think about other people, as long as they are not being mean or anything like that or using bad words. It is normal to think about other people. So this is kind of like something that I really found interesting in the Reporteros 3 program that I use with my Spanish 4. Let's talk a little bit also about the affective filter that you all know, of course, by the Master of Masters, Dr. Stephen Krashen. And we know that the less anxiety, the more acquisition. So the students need to have an affective filter that is low. In other words, they need to be relaxed, safe, and confident. And this is something that we need to work on the very two first weeks of school. Because if we don't, then it's going to be really hard for the students to feel relaxed and confident in the class. If we start right with the curriculum, showing them their mistakes and making it a little complex, they are going to lose that self-confidence. Okay? So, for example, when we talk about affective filter, during a presentation, instead of interrupting to correct mistakes, allow the presentation to flow. What is the first thing that we do when we're speaking a different language and we know our brain knows that we made a mistake. If we're in a class, we look at the teacher right away, kind of like waiting for, okay, is the teacher going to correct me or say something? See, it's been a very long time since I decided to just let it flow. So they make a mistake. They're stressed. They look at me and I'm just like, like I'm understanding everything here. Okay. Afterwards, then we can highlight together common errors, but in an anonymously way. So after a presentation, a set of presentations, after a quiz when they had to write a paragraph, then we dedicate 15 minutes of the next class to talk about the most common mistakes I have seen when writing paragraphs or when presenting. That way, the affective filter goes down. It's low because the student doesn't feel that we're picking on them. Okay? Also, the intentional error slides. So students know that there are mistakes planted on the slides on purpose. So what I tell them is that, okay, today you're going to be the error detectives. And today you're going to tell me what do I need to change in this paragraph in order to make it better. Sometimes I will take it straight from a quiz, but not from that same class, but the other section. I flip flop them, okay? Because even if no one knows who wrote that paragraph with all those mistakes, the kid who did it, and if the kid is present there, is gonna feel embarrassed. But most of the times, I just ask my friend ChatGPT to write me a paragraph with mistakes for intermediate low students about the topic of technology. And we work on that. Another way is that before a writing task, we can start with a 2-minute brain stretch where students can share something funny or unexpected in Spanish. Of course, laughter lowers the affective filter. Um, it is very important that we have a sense of humor in our classes. Sense of humor is the best way to lower that affective filter, but without sarcasm, because sarcasm is just something totally different. Okay? We need a judgment free space. We need to avoid public corrections and foster safety. Instead of saying, no, that is incorrect, rephrase, I see what you mean. How could we express that idea in another way, in a different way? Okay? So creativity and risk taking only thrive when the environment feels emotionally safe. And that happens to us as well as adults. We go to a teachers meeting or a parent teacher conference, and if we don't feel emotionally safe, we're not going to take any risk and we're not going to be ourselves. So judgment free. Okay? And the element of surprise, small changes that wake up attention. When you talk to your students about the element of surprise, don't be surprised if they tell you that in other classes they have the same rigorous schedule. We get to the class, we do from the textbook, activity number, whatever, then we do little pair work, then we do individual activity, and then we do the closing. Always like this. The element of surprise in language classes, it's very important because the brain is always craving for novelty. The brain awakes. So even with minor surprises, we can renew focus and energy. And if the student is somewhere else in another space, we need to bring some kind of surprise so they re-energize. Okay, for example, let's start the class with unexpected input. Let's not always start the class with what we did yesterday. I'm going to talk about this because we talked about technology yesterday, so I'm going to talk about technology today. Maybe we can start with a short TikTok video clip, or maybe a quote that you find interesting. What I've been doing lately is telling them what International or World Day is, but I always try to find things that are interesting because there's usually two or three things that are celebrated internationally each day. So, for example, the other day was International Day of Bald People. Entonces, el Día Mundial de los Calvos. Así que es sorpresa. It is a surprise for them. Might not be connected to what we are doing, but that engages them right away. Let's change the routine at least once a week. Less, very important. Um, my master, Ben Slavic, says you need to know very well your space in the classroom. You should be able to walk your classroom through the desks with your eyes closed. And it makes me remember what he said when I think about teaching from a new spot in the room. It's so interesting how our students' brain work that it is possible that if you always teach from the same place, obviously you're always going to be in front or next to the same kids. In their brain, they are their favorite kids. So we need to move and teach from different angles. We need to sit with them. It is so important to sit with them, to do an activity or even to teach. Or when someone is presenting a project, sit with them, close to them. I always occupy the seat of the person who's presenting. At first, they were like, ugh, but they get used to it. And that day, I make sure that I use perfume. I don't use perfume, but I use deodorant. And I take a shower that day. Okay? Or you can begin the class. We're talking about surprise. We can begin the class saying, today I'm not your teacher, I'm a travel agent. And we're going to turn a grammar lesson into the conditional on planning a imaginary vacation. Okay? So let's just switch it up a little bit. Okay, so when we talk about the element of surprise, another thing that I like about the Reporteros program, and this is true for every book of Reporteros or, excuse my French, repertoires, the French version or the German version, is that they present the students with things that they actually use right now. So I'm sharing this with you because many of my students were very surprised when they saw that every lesson starts with a chat, a conversation via WhatsApp with friends, among friends here, the Reporteros friends. Many of our students in the United States do not use WhatsApp. But they say that their parents do because their parents have friends in Europe or in Latin America, and that's the way we communicate mostly. So they grow an interest thanks to the element of surprise. All right, my friends. Now we talk about why we do this. We talk about some, guides that the people who knows about this know. Those elements of autonomy and relevance and personal connections, I take that from Daniel Pink in his book Motivation, but obviously I apply it here to world languages. So now we're going to talk about practical strategies to how to make it feel fun and meaningful, which is the name of this session. Okay? Muy bien. So here we go. For example, this is just an activity that is called Know the Rules. So if you want to work with grammar, okay, right? several rules of grammar. For example, the use of por versus para, preterite versus imperfect, or adjective agreement on small cards or slips. Then you're going to divide the students into teams. One member runs to the front, reads a rule, memorizes it as much as they can, runs back and dictates it to the teammates. Then the team must reproduce the rule and an example correctly. Okay, they can make mistakes, of course, because, especially if the rule is too long, let's try to break it up. But we are working with grammar in a fun way. I know this description here is a little short, so that's why I have created a document where I give you more guidance on how to do this activity in the classroom. So I'm going to go to the chat and I'm going to share with you this document. This document, the activity, know the rules relay, has the objectives, how to set up the classroom, examples, timing and flow of the activity, examples by grammar topic, variations of the game, assessments, kind of like a rubric, and why it works. And I hope that you find it helpful. So I'm going to put it in the chat. As I always say to those who attend my webinars, please open the document right now on your browser. Please open it on your browser and leave it there because you cannot copy and paste from Zoom. Okay? So make sure you guys leave it on your browser and then you can save it later on. So this activity, know the rules, know the grammar rules. Okay, more practical strategies. Grammar and vocabulary without pain. I always thought that allowing our students to design their own crosswords was very interesting because they have the time to process. Many of you talk about Kahoots, which also work, but let's allow the students to create their own Kahoots. For example, studying the future tense, a student write clues like, in 10 years, I blank in New York. So in the Kahoot, you know that you give the options and you put the right thing. I think it helps a lot. Um, but also you can create crosswords, okay? So I have an example here, I believe, of a grammar crossword. Está en español, it's in Spanish. And I believe this is a crossword created by a student. So I'm going to share the example too in the chat so you guys can take a look later. So I'm gonna put it here in the chat. A todos, okay, here we go. And then I'm going to show you a challenge. So this is the document that explains well the student design crosswords or challenges. Again, objectives, activity rationale. So I believe it's better if I just share this with you instead of me going over this whole thing on a Thursday at 5:38. So you guys will have the time to do it on your own. Later on, don't forget to leave this open. Okay. All right. If you need access to the drive, what's happened? I believe that if it's a student sample, I cannot give you access. But if it's the document with the samples, I can give you the access. Okay. All right. So why is meaningful? When we allow our students to create design crosswords or challenges. It is meaningful because the students can internalize patterns by creating input for other students. You know very well that it's common to say that the best way to learn is by teaching. So it's kind of like the same idea. They learn more deeply because they must think like we have to think every day, meaning like teachers. Okay? All right, here we go. That's another example that I put there. Okay. More strategies, how to make it feel fun and meaningful, especially meaningful. Okay? Grammar and vocabulary without pain. Feedback without fear. So reserve a classroom wall or digital board with two sections. The red zone with common mistakes. Yo gusto de bailar. That's not how you say it in Spanish. You say a mí me gusta bailar or me gusta bailar. And a green zone. Corrected versions. Me gusta bailar. Post anonymous examples weekly and invite students to move errors from red and green as they fix them collaboratively. See? So it's an activity that is going to make them feel really good and they can work in pairs, you know? I know it takes a little bit of time. You can use post-it notes, but the idea is that by the end of the week, the red ones are in the right place and the green ones are in the right place. Okay? You can also add kind of like a little bit of humor in the sticky notes, or you can allow the students to make drawings related to the sentences that you have there. So it's kind of like a combination between grammar and laughter. So there's a document here that I prepared for you with, very specific explanation of the activity and some examples as well. Okay, so I'm gonna share that again in the chat with all of you. You should have access to it. Okay. Boop, 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 boop. Yeah, someone asked me for the error wall, do you give time during each class/week to work on this? Of course, it's part of the class, my friends. This is part of the class. This is class time well spent. Okay? All right, let's move on. All right, why it works? Because mistakes become learning opportunities instead of personal failures. We know that very well. Okay, context and near to self culture. Okay, so the contextualized meme creation. For this, students will use grammar or vocabulary to create memes based on something real or funny in their life, school, or current events. It is amazing that memes have been so popular for so long time. What happens is that they are changing platforms. Memes started being very popular on Facebook, then the kids ditched Facebook, then they moved to Twitter, and now kids don't have Twitter. I don't have, I still have Twitter, but I don't use it for other reasons. And now they're very popular in TikTok, but they are still very current. So it is good to work with memes. You can also display, allow your students to print it and create a meme wall. See? Because that helps creating also community pride. And I want to give an example here. For reflexive verbs, meme of a sleepy student, me despierto, pero no me levanto. Okay. Topic subjunctive for wishes. Meme of a soccer fan. Ojalá que gane mi equipo. For those who doesn't speak Spanish, the first meme says, I wake up, but I wake up, but I don't get up. Reflexive verbs. And this one is a subjunctive is I wish my team wins. Okay? It's meaningful because the students are using humor, but it's personal. So having a wall of memes, it's going to be very relevant for them. It will have a significance, real significance to them. And we are also connecting grammar with emotion. There is a friend in Spain who talks about the emotions of grammar. See? And we don't look at those things, but when we bring together grammar with emotions, there's the perfect connection, especially when we talk about the subjunctive and wishes and all of these things. Okay, so there is a resource that I like, put together by Alison Weinhold, who's a teacher from Iowa, I believe. And she has this resource that is called Martes de Meme. She uses them as bell ringers. And let's see, when you get this resource, this is what you're going to see. Hopefully, it will open. Okay, let's see. For example, here. Martes de meme. En la escala de perro, ¿cómo te sientes hoy? Yo me siento. So on the scale of dog, how do you feel today? I feel, or we can go to en la escala de Beyoncé. ¿Cómo te sientes hoy? Yo me siento. En la escala de panda. ¿Cómo te sientes hoy? Yo me siento. And there's an activity there um, to create the meme with these pictures. I cannot share the resource link with you, but if you Google Martes de Meme and Señora Weinhold, you're going to find it. Okay? Martes de Meme, Señora Weinhold. Obviously, this is for Spanish class. But I found it humorous. The students love it. They love this when we're working with the reflexive verbs. Okay, muy bien. So let's move on. Remember, we're talking about context. We're talking about making it real for the students. We can also have an activity that is called the photo hunt for abstract concepts. So you assign words that are kind of like abstract concepts, like esperanza, which means hope, amistad, friendship, libertad, freedom, or soledad, which means loneliness. My daughter is visiting me right now, so I'm gonna say hi. Hi, preciosa. What do you want? No, mi amor, I'm wearing the tie. Okay, she wants my tie. Okay, because she loves my ties and she wanted my tie. Okay, Sophie, close the door, please. Okay, ciao. Okay, my apologies. My daughter has Down syndrome and autism, and she doesn't know that I'm at a very important meeting right now. So my apologies. So anyway, we take these abstract concepts and we ask the students to capture that concept in a picture that they take of themselves. No Google images allowed here. So then they have to explain why. See how everything is connected, guys? Sometimes when we only do games, it's not really that connected to the student's reality or life. Okay? So this activity really blends together emotion, creativity, and also cultural understanding while practicing in the scripted language. Why? Because if you have a student, for example, from Colombia, I'm originally from Colombia, and you have the word hope, I know the picture is going to be quite different from someone in the United States because each culture has their own view of life, their own experiences. To me, hope is the end of war, internal war that there's in my country. That's hope for me. For me, hope is having good schools for everyone, like in the United States, beautiful public schools. See? So that's hope for me. So see how we're blending culture in a very simple kind of project. Okay? All right. So we keep talking about context and culture, self culture. An example, word esperanza, photo of sunrise over their neighborhood. Okay. Word amistad, picture of sneakers side by side. Okay. So when we talk about hope and when we talk about this kind of activity, We talk about ourselves from another perspective, more personal perspective. Uh, there's a mini project in the Reporteros Tres book that is called Mi Mundo en un Collage. And I love it. I love this project. Unfortunately, there was a link here to an example of one of my students, but we missed the link. It's not here anymore. Anyway, so the idea is that they create a collage, just pictures, and then they explain why those things portraying those pictures are important or what do they mean. I find it very important to give them some kind of flexibility, remember autonomy, and allow them to include things that we didn't ask for. So if we ask for, okay, picture for hope, picture for friendship, picture for whatever, and two other words that you want to include, that works much better when they do the project. Okay, so it's a coincidence that this kind of project is also here in the Reporteros Tres book. Okay, so this is probably the last one here. Serious songs and personal objects. So the students bring elements from their cultural or media worlds. So they describe objects. So we're not talking about concepts. Now we're talking about personal objects that are more meaningful to them. For example, or they can discuss favorite series, Elite, La Casa de Papel, which are two very famous series on Netflix that the students really like. Um, Even though La Casa de Papel is a little strong sometimes in the violence and the language, but still some teachers can show pieces of La Casa de Papel. They're gonna watch it anyway. So when we do this kind of thing with objects and things that they really like, students uh, discover how Spanish also exists in books, in movies, in songs, in things that they like. I don't want this to sound bad, but it's very common that many of our students believe that best things in life are only part of their culture or are always presented in their native language, in English. And when they see that they can like a song or a movie in the target language, they're like, wow, wow, what? That's possible? Is the world that big? I told you at the beginning of the webinar that at the beginning of the class, I do the World Day of something. Remember, I put the example of World Day of Bald People, El Día Mundial del Calvo. The first time that I presented a World Day, I was like, okay, what means World Day? And their answer was, oh, it's American Day of something. I'm like, really? American Day? So America is the world. Okay. See, so these are things that are meaningful and are teaching our students many things at the same time. When we work with songs, for example, um, songs that connect topics like AP topics like identity, family, beauty, and when we get involved working with them, we sit in the middle of the class, or we do something like this, it's more meaningful and it's fun to them. It's just a copy of the official video of the song, but we got there with the students, and this is fun. And I know that they will never forget this song. In fact, this video is from like 18 years ago while I was in Wisconsin. And many of these kids are already married with a family, and they always write via Facebook, hey, Señor, you remember Bonito? Of course. And it's a song that has a beautiful message as well. Okay? So, excellent, my friends. Here we go. So, we talk about He andado muchos caminos. So we talk about songs, we talk about pictures, we talk about series, but we can also talk about poetry. And there's a poem that is very famous that students like by Antonio Machado. He andado muchos caminos, which means my own paths. And the poem goes, he andado muchos caminos, I have traveled many roads. He abierto muchas veredas, I have opened many fields. He navegado en 100 mares, I have navigated in 100 seas. Y he atracado en 100 riberas, and I have, let's just say, stopped in 100 shores. That's the real poem. But then they have to do their own version. And this student, he jugado muchos partidos. I have played a lot of games. He cruzado muchos campos, but he's referring to campo de fútbol. I have crossed many football fields. He corrido en muchos caminos. I have run in many football fields. Y he pegado muchas pelotas, and I have kicked many um, the ball, no, the football. So we keep going here. Uh, like in every place I have seen, place full of hope, and some with a lot of happiness, and some with a little bit of sadness. So connecting, guys, connecting always what we do and the examples that we bring to the class with their reality, with their lives. Okay? So that was another example there. All right, here we go. Pick up the pace, Senor Ojeda. So islands, it's another activity. I'm going to share right away the description of the activity so you can take a look later, but it's another document with the whole description. So you can take a look on your own because I see that it's already 7 p.m. Okay. All right, let's move on. So we talk about movement and play, how movement is so important, how movement wakes up the attention of the students, how movement strengthens communication and lowers anxiety through activities and games. So, physical movement refreshes the brain and encourages spontaneous low stakes activities. This one, gallery walk conversations that most of you might be familiar with is also a way, to get moving. So make sure that we get moving with purpose. Sometimes we do these brain breaks where the students, okay, they move, but it's not very relevant to the class. We end up doing some activities that are not connected with the language that we're trying to teach. Yes, they are fun, but better if they are connected with what we are doing in the class. Okay, so gallery walk is this the activity, and then we keep moving to the next one that is called stand up if game. So the teacher reads a series of statements aloud and students stand up or raise a card if the statement applies to them. For example, me gusta bailar salsa. So they either show you the card or they stand up. He comido arepas. The whole document here with more examples that you can apply and work with in your class is right here. Okay. All right. Sorry, running out of time here. All right, my friends. So let's move on. Is this the same game? More examples? It's just a way to allow them to move in the class. And now let's finish with high impact projects in the world language classroom, projects that can be fun as well. So remember that projects should be personal, communicative, and collaborative. Never busy work. The moment a project is busy work, they disengage not just with that project, but with future projects. What? A project again? So there must be a balance. Let's balance the fun with clear goals. So students express something real while practicing the target structures and cultural understanding. So the core formula when we do mini projects is personalization plus communication plus collaboration. This results in deep, joyful learning. But we need to be very, very organized on this. Be very purposeful, intentional, okay? So let's look at some projects. The one that I promised you at the beginning of the session, magazine of my life. So the goal is to review past tense, vocabulary of identity, and storytelling. So each student designs a 6-page magazine, digital or printed, entirely in Spanish about their life and dreams. So let's take a look at 2 examples here. So let's look at this one first. Okay, this is a magazine put together by Cal, his name. He graduated a few years ago. Uh, Obviously, for the student to come up with this, they are either very creative or you gave them very clear instructions. I go the second way because I want all of them to feel successful with the product. When we leave it to their creativity, let's understand that 70% of the class is not creative or 80%. So I told them we need to have a cover page. The cover page needs to have a title. The cover page needs subtitles to the articles. And better if you write in the cover letter what page you find that article. Also, the cover page must have the date. So look at the date, May 2019. But it also has to have the volume and the price. So they come up with different things. Mi infancia, nací en Cambridge, Massachusetts, fui a la escuela primaria en Bloom hasta cuarto grado, actividades favoritas, su experiencia en la escuela secundaria, kind of like the present tense here, and el futuro. Voy a ser un matemático y voy a estudiar matemáticas, me casaré y tendré algunos hijos, con suerte. Okay, so that's an example. There's another example. I think that's the same one. Sorry. There's another example here. I think this is by Alex. Consejos de vida con Alex. Okay. So the sections are salud, viajes, relaciones personales y finanzas. Salud mental. En mi experiencia, la salud mental es muy importante. Una de las razones por qué tengo tanto éxito es por mi buena salud mental. Aquí hay 4 consejos. Entonces, consejos usando el subjuntivo. In Spanish here, they're using the subjunctive to give some advice on mental health. Salud física. Their own pictures. There's Alex playing number 17. More advice talking about finance. Okay, he's giving us advice on finance. La familia no solo es importante, lo es todo. That he says that he thought about that. Family is not just important, it's everything. In my opinion, family is the most important thing. If you value your family and the relationships, you're gonna succeed in general. Success is defined by happiness. And if you have good relations, happy relations with your family, you're gonna be successful. Wow, very profound. Okay, ¿cómo tener éxito? Then he give us some advice here. Wow, okay, pero son mini proyectos where they had very specific um, um, directions. Okay, if you're interested on the directions of this project, please send me an email to my school email, which is diojeda@lucol, so I can put it out from the drive. That is my email. Okay. Be patient if I don't answer right away. You need to be patient. Okay, but I will answer. Okay. Mini interviews. So students interviewing each other. We use visuals. We use collages like the ones that I was talking about before. We have a language focus, or if you want to call it a grammar focus. And we talk about childhood, for example. Let's see what this visual is. Oh, yes. Okay, so this project is like they had to create their own Instagram page. Even if they have Instagram, this is for Spanish class, okay? So the visual, okay? And they have to obviously use Spanish for all the little things, notificaciones, which means notifications, publicaciones, publications, seguidores, followers. This should be seguidores, which is followers. This, okay, anyway, or people that they follow or follow them. So there is a little biography de Tomás. Me llamo Tomás, me gusta chatear con mis amigos y juego los deportes. También me gusta levantar pesas, me encantan los memes y me gusta compartir videos cortos con mis amigos. A little biography. And then pictures, real pictures. I love this one. Mi gato con un filtro. Right here. Fotos en mi primer Ryder Cup en Estados Unidos. Ok. Entonces, todos estos son mini proyectos, or all of these are mini projects that are fun. The kids have fun putting these things together, and they're working with the language. They're focusing on the language, okay? We can have interactive grammar posters explained by students, reinforce grammar through ownership and peer teaching. For example, students choose one grammar topic, subjunctive with emotion, por or para, commands. They create a visual poster, paper, Canva, or Jamboard explaining the rule in their own words with examples, humor, and creativity. So remember, always bring together grammar and humor and emotions. So they must have at least 3 original examples from real life, visual support, QR code, or short video clip. Por ejemplo, here, ¿por qué usamos por y para sin dolor de cabeza? ¿Por qué usamos por y para sin dolor de cabeza? Okay, that's one example that is a little descontextualized. Okay, viajo por tren porque es más barato. So I travel by train because it's cheaper. Pero voy a Madrid para ver a mi abuela. Okay, class routine. We can also have a grammar gallery walk with this activity. We can work on simple websites or cultural maps. So integrating a little bit of technology as well, creating a mini website or an interactive map. They can do all of that with Google in order to put it together in a different way, not always the poster, not always the collage, but also using a little bit of technology, okay? All right, this is an example about Medellin, a city in Colombia, but they need to, for a web page, include pictures. There are some variations here. My family's cultural roots, which is great for heritage learners. Global Spanish map, so they choose one region to research and describe in Spanish. And then skits with artistic liberty. This is, I think, the last one that I'm showing you today. So the goal is to encourage creativity, teamwork, and interpretive reading. After reading a story, play, or literary text or grammar, groups adapt a scene, but they are told they can reinterpret it freely, changing the setting, style, or even the genre. Okay? Meaning they can do whatever they want. Artistic liberty. The only rule, they must show understanding of the original work. And I have a video here to show you an example of artistic liberty. Okay. Okay, the idea here, they had to interpret or dramatize a scene of the book Caras Vemos by Teresa Jensen, great author, recommended. Caras Vemos. And it was a scene where this girl goes to Subway and meets someone who works there. Okay, it keeps going. Someone's gonna say, but they're not saying anything. Yes, they are saying many things just by the gestures and the movement. They are showing me that they understood what they uh, read or that piece of reading. The author, Teresa Jensen, the book Caras Vemos, recommended for like a level 3, 4. Okay? All right, my friends. So these are sample lines if they create things that they are going to be talking about. Notice how in the Reportero series, every lesson, every chapter includes 2 mini proyectos. Mini proyecto, mini proyecto, mini proyecto, mini proyecto. These are great, guys, and you can adapt them to your classes. Um, Dedicate time to put this together in the classes because students find them fun. Okay? All right. So remember that fun doesn't mean aimless. The best projects are playful and purposeful. Each mini project should have a communicative goal, a linguistic target, a product or performance, and a reflection moment. What did I learn about myself or about Spanish? Señor, it was fun to make that video. Señor, it was fun to make that magazine. Señor, it was fun to make that collage, Señor. Señor, it was fun, the drama activity that we did. So let's reflect on this, my friends. Remember the core principles. Always a free of judgment climate, safe climate, okay? When was the last time I celebrated a student's idea before correcting their grammar? It's not correct grammar, much less in front of the other students, okay? So remember that errors happen and errors are the best way to learn, especially when we're learning language or acquiring languages. And remember the importance of humor. Humor lowers the affective filter like nothing, okay? So the factor of surprise, let's bring something different. I don't know, play music, do something different. Don't be the science class where everything is done the same way every day. Bring a meme, bring the International Day of whatever, sit in chart, change it, allow them to move, to speak up. Let's bring the factor of surprise and movement to the class. What could you do tomorrow that your students wouldn't expect but will love? Because this is something that you don't have to wait for next year. You can do it tomorrow easily. So give students a voice to create and not just consume. Shift from answering to authoring. So let's replace that work, and I cannot say that word because it sounds weird in my English and pronunciation. I say work paper with a mini project where they can be creative, be themselves, and tell us a little bit more about who they are. Okay? So, what is your next grammar lesson ended with students teaching you something? What if your next grammar lesson ends with the students teaching you something? Okay, let's think about those things. Let's give the students a voice to create, not just to consume. Okay, I think this is repeated. Okay, all right, yeah, that one was repeated. All right, my friends. So let's use also student-made materials. It's important for them. And when we correct paragraphs with the students, that becomes student-created material. Okay? So let's remember, when students feel joy, connection, and purpose, language becomes more than vocabulary. It becomes part of who they are. Another example here.
Hola, Colombia tiene muchos aspectos chéveres de su cultura rica. Hay buena comida y arquitectura. Y hay colombianas fantásticas como Shakira, que cambian el mundo con canciones perfectas. Ella ha ganado muchos premios por sus canciones. pero tú debes le gusta el arte visual. No, no Shakira, el arte visual. No, no más Shakira. Lo siento, lo siento. Tú debes le gusta el arte visual. La
Okay, okay, I'm gonna stop. Okay, guys. So I think I need to remember to close here. What your students, what will your students remember most is the way you felt in the classroom, not the work paper that we work with. Thank you so much. My name is Diego Ojeda. It's been a pleasure sharing these strategies with you. I hope you find them useful. And I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your school year. And I believe I will be presenting another session in December. So I hope that you register and join us. Um, we are done.
Yes, and thank you, Diego, for such an inspiring session. So we're now going to open the floor for the questions. We're a bit over time, but still, if you have any questions, please feel free to add them on the Q&A or on the chat. And also, before we do that, just so I don't forget, Diego is also gonna be presenting in Actful for us. I'm gonna share the link in here. He's gonna be one of our presenters for Actful 2025. I'm putting the link in here. I'm gonna share the rest of the links in a couple seconds, but let's go for those questions first. So the first one, Diego, would be in the scenario of a K2 teacher that is teaching 5 times a week, which is a lot.
Mm, mm.
And what would you suggest teaching besides vocabulary?
We don't teach vocabulary, we use vocabulary. We don't learn the language, we acquire the language. So uh, I think that you don't have as many opportunities to reunite with your students. Use that for a lot of input, but input that they understand. And you don't even have to go in order. You don't have to start with the days of the week and the colors and the numbers from 1 to 20. You can bring whatever topic that is appealing to them, so that way it's relevant.
Perfect. And now focusing a bit on time in general. So the next question is about someone that likes some of the ideas, but their class period was cut 15 minutes from what they previously had. They're already behind in the scope and sequence. So the question is how to fit this in some of these activities that you mentioned.
Well, you always have the opportunity or the chance to ask the students to record themselves. So for me, some homeworks are record yourself in a video doing this or saying this or audio. It depends on what, because I understand that not always we have the time to do everything in the classroom.
Amazing. So for our next question, first I'm going to read it in Spanish as is what it was asked and then I'll translate, which is, Señor Ojeda, las presentaciones las hacen de forma oral ante la clase y por cuánto tiempo logran mantener la atención. So basically,
Ah,
if, yeah,
sí, sí, sí. Okay, so the question is, how long are the presentations and for how long do they keep the students' attention? In order to make sure that kids are listening, we need to explain them. We need to explain them every time there's gonna be someone presenting something. You stop and say, guys, remember, we have two things here: the person presenting, who has put a lot of work in their presentation, and the audience, who's gonna listen and ask relevant questions. But you're gonna wait for pauses in the presentation to make those questions. So I want to hear interesting questions, not like cuál es tu color favorito, but interesting questions. And I will keep track of those interesting questions, okay, because it's part of your participation here. Person presenting, remember that there's 20 more people here in front of you, not just me, so don't talk to me. I'm not here. Talk to the class. And that's why most of the times I sit with the class, because the class disengages when the presenter is talking just to the teacher. They're like, why are we here? So we need to give a role to the kids in the classroom. I hate to ask them to take notes of the presentation because they feel it like as a punishment, but they can come up with questions. And I always say, relate those questions to your own life and see yourself from the perspective they are presenting and how different it is. Or if you want to make a comment about, how you do this or that, it's valid.
Great. Now, for the next question, we have the case of a K4 Spanish teacher, and this far into the presentation, well, far before, they were wondering if this is appropriate for their age range. So, would you consider that some of the things we did would be appropriate for a K4?
K4, some of the
Yes,
things, yeah. And at the end, you can just adapt, to whatever topic you're working with currently. These kids, after third grade, they know how to work the technology. They know how to make a collage. They know how to make a Google presentation. So I would say that most of the activities presented here can be adapted to those levels.
amazing. And going more specifically for the magazine activity, do they get formative feedback while working on it? Do you have them do it or in or out of class?
We usually work in the classroom, but I also give extra time outside of the classroom to those who need it. So during the class work, I like to give them feedback. They are supposed to ask me questions, and we know the students, they don't want to have mistakes. So it's important that we support the process.
Great. We have two more questions.
All
So,
right.
yes. So, one of them is how much English do you use in the classroom, for example, grammar instructions, and how do you maintain the target language?
Okay. We can do another webinar on that one, right?
Yep.
But basically, we use comprehensible input, meaning that I'm using input that I know that is going to be understood by the students, either because I'm using cognates or because I'm using visuals or because of my gestures. So it is important to keep it in Spanish because, and that they understand the language because that's what makes them feel proud of learning or acquiring a different language. If we give the directions and we just speak English the whole time, their brain is not challenged and they're gonna be bored because they know that everything is gonna come in English afterwards. It doesn't have to be um, nuclear science. We can explain things in a very easy way. That is also telling them that they can also use the language in an easy way, not complicated way, in order to communicate.
If you don't teach vocabulary as we acquire it, do you also do the same thing with grammar?
Yeah, and if we try to connect grammar with emotions, that is fundamental. When we talk about our childhood, let's focus on the things that were important in our childhood. Obviously, they have to use the imperfect. See? When we talk about our day for the reflexives, tell me how hard it is for you to get up, to wake up, and why. Or exaggerate. We can combine grammar and vocabulary in one thing with emotions in order to make it relevant to the students and gain acquisition.
Perfect. We're going to do just one last question that just came up.
You said two. Just kidding.
Yeah, just the last one because it's actually very interesting, which is how do you cope with the student who often miss class due to medical issues, and what would you advise to help this student feel like he is still part of the team?
Medical issues. I'm a little lost there. Are
Yeah,
we
so
talking about learning disabilities? Are we talking about diabetes? Um, are we talking about a student who cannot move in the class?
we have so someone in the chat said absenteeism, and the person who wrote the question, I believe, said heart condition.
You know, absenteeism has roots, deep roots in school culture, family culture. There are things that can be frustrating for us. I do have students that sometimes are absent a lot, but when they are in class, they enjoy their time there. And the reasons why they're absent are out of my hands, and I'm not going to ask for details. But just let's try to keep it fun and fundamental so whenever they're there, they have a good attitude.
Fantastic.
Okay?
So that was our last question.
All
So
right.
as usual, thank you very much, Diego, for your presentation, and thank you all of you for joining us tonight. Before we wrap up, just a few final reminders. So first, we shared the link again. So if you'd like to explore the Clever Languages materials that Diego shared, we encouraged you to request a complimentary sample. Bear in mind that Reporteros it also has like a version in French, which is Reporter francophone, a version in German, and we're preparing a version in Italian as well. You can ask a sample for any of the ones in the series. Also, we're going to send you on your email a feedback form. Your input really helps us to improve future webinars, so we would appreciate if you can do that for us. And as we said, we also share the link for the certificate of attendance in the chat, so you should receive that immediately. And just as a small reminder, the recording will also be shared with you and the presentation, of course. And you can explore the rest of the languages, our fundamental webinar series on our website. I'm going to share that link in here so you can take a look and hopefully join us for the next one. And that's it on behalf of Credible Languages in Central States. Thank you again for spending your evening with us. I hope you all have a wonderful night and to see you again at our next session. Thank
Thank
you.
you so much.